All right, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to discuss and showcase and try and troubleshoot missing colors on a G07. Now we don't get to see missing colors on a G07 troubleshot very often. Usually it's like K7000s or K4900s and things like that. But this has been rebuilt, it's recapped, reflowed, flyback, the whole thing. This came out of the monitor at the arcade in the Robotron. So the Robotron actually had issues, and I got a message saying, hey, the monitor's not working properly. So I went to take a look and I found out that it's missing the green color. So I took it off the tube, brought it home, hooked it up to my test tube, and sure enough, no green. So I put a replacement G07 in the Robotron to get it up and running again. So it's good to go. I took the chassis off the tube, brought it home, and here we have it, no green. So let's get it off of this tube and let's go through some of the issues that can cause no colors on a G07. Okay, here we have the chassis on the bench, and the first thing you want to check and verify if you have a missing color of any kind is your video input harness, the harness that comes from your JAMA edge connector through the wiring to the connector that plugs into your chassis. You want to ohm out that wire, make sure the wire is not broken, make sure it ohms out from the connector to the PCB, make sure your PCB isn't the problem. If you have another board to swap in for your game or whatever it is, do all that. If you can eliminate everything from here that way, then you're left with the monitor. So also, it's somewhat uncommon for the monitor to be the cause. I mean, usually when the guns go bad, they short or things like, they don't normally open up completely. Now it is common for one gun to be dead, but you saw there the red gun and the blue gun were very bright and vibrant. The green gun was nothing at all. And if you have a situation where all of the colors are muted, if you have very muted red and very muted blue and green is gone completely, then it's highly likely you might have a tube as the issue. But if your other two colors are nice and bright and one is dead completely, it's not very likely the tube is the problem. So in that case, it's a chassis issue. So what you want to do is first a visual inspection. Take your header pins here and flip your monitor chassis over and just look at your connections. Now in this case we know that's not our problem because I've already reflowed this, and you can see here that our input header pins are not cracked, not popped, not broken. All of our input header pins are in fine shape, so it's not the problem. So then you have to worry about, okay, is there an issue with the neck board? So on the neck board here you have your 3-color drive transistors. I'm going to look and make sure that you don't have any that are flat, splatted over where the leg is broken, because sometimes these get hit and the transistor gets bent over and the center pin gets busted off, things like that. But these are actually in really good shape. Visually speaking, there's nothing that's wrong with them. So if that's okay, you want to flip your neck board over and start ringing out or ohming out or checking for continuity, diode mode, however you want to refer to it, all of your transistors for your drive. Now I don't say all of them, but the one that is bad, and then compare and contrast your readings. So if we do this here, we can see meter in diode mode, and there is the board is conveniently marked. You have the base, collector, and emitter. Now, these have all been reflowed already. So also you want to check to make sure that you don't have any popped pads with broken traces, any kind of discoloration, burn marks, but in this case these have all been reflowed and are in very nice condition. Like I say, sometimes when these get bent over, it'll pop the pad off and break the trace. I've seen that so many times on K7000s especially, where these transistors get folded over and flattened out, and it completely either breaks the leg on the transistor or it pops the pad right off the trace, and you have to just do a little pad and trace repair. Like on the K7400 and 7500, 2000, 5000, especially, trace repair is the most common problem on those series of chassis missing a color. But we're worried here about the G07. So assuming that you don't have any broken legs, and assuming you don't have any lifted, busted pads or traces, we start ohming out these transistors. So you put your meter in diode mode, you put your positive lead on the base of each transistor, and you're worried about the reading between the base and the collector and the base and the emitter. You should have 0.7 voltage drop between the base and the collector and the base and the emitter for all three. So this is our red one. Yes, this is our red one. You can follow the trace through here to this red wire. So if we go base to collector, no, we want 0.6, I'm sorry, 0.6 voltage drop. 0.7 I'll get to shortly. So Base to collector, 0.6. Base to emitter, 0.59, so 0.6. So let's go to our blue one. Base to collector, 0.6. Base to emitter, come on, 0.6. Base to, I did the collector. Base collector, base emitter. There we go, 0.6, 0.6. Now our green one. Base to collector, 0.6. Base to emitter, 0.6. So it's not, there you go, hold on there. Okay, so yeah, so it's not our transistor that is the cause of our problem. So in that case, we want to make sure our wiring is good. So our wire that transmits our green signal from the PCB to the board is a good solid connection right there. We follow this through, and sometimes this connector here can get very oxidized. So we want to remove this connector, and I broke it as par for the course. This gets very hot. So we'll just put that back and forget that that ever happened. Okay. And our pins look really good because I cleaned them up previously. All these pins like to get very brown and oxidized, so clean those up whenever you rebuild these, but those are all in good shape, so it's not a problem of our connection or our wiring to the neck board from the main board. We'll just pretend that that never got broken. Well, it didn't work out, did it? All right, well, goodbye. That's all right. This gets very brittle from the heat, and you know, it doesn't really matter. It's all right. It's just for protection. It'll be good. Okay, so it's not that. So you're left with the input here. So coming off of these video input header pins, red, green, and blue, there are transistors that are responsible for color drive, if you will. Like on the K7000, where you connect the video connector, there's 3 little transistors there for RGB. It's the same thing with this one. There is, I believe it's X103 is for green. X101 is, this one here is for red, this one here is for green, and this one over here, which is I believe X501, no 105, X105. So it's 101 for red, 103 for green, and 105 for blue. So if we flip this over here, I'll show you how to trace all this out. So this is our last resort here, and I should also say that if you have all of one color, if your screen is completely blue, completely red, or completely green, but you do not have the horizontal retrace lines, then one of these 3 transistors is likely shorted. If you have no color, and it's nothing, none of the issues we've already discussed are the problem, it's likely one of these transistors. So all of one color with no retrace lines, one of these 3 transistors, X101, 103, 105, are likely shorted. So keep that in mind if you ever have that problem as well. If you have all of one color with the horizontal retrace lines, then your color gun in the tube is shorted. So with retrace lines, it's tube. Without retrace lines, it's likely one of these 3 X101, 103, 105 transistors is shorted for all of one color. For missing color, if it's none of the issues we've already discussed previously up to this point, we got to check these 3 transistors here for being open. So we'll put our meter again in diode mode, and I'll trace this out here, but let me show you here. So here is our red. This is our red input. If we follow this trace, it goes to this capacitor here and jumps this trace over to this trace through this resistor and through this capacitor. And you'll notice here, here's our this is X101. And if we look here, we see our transistor here, base, collector, emitter. So again, we put our red lead on our base, and if we go across our collector and our emitter, we're checking for a 0.7 voltage drop. So collector to, I'm sorry, base to collector, 0.7, 695. Base to emitter, 0.7. So that transistor is good. Now let's skip over to our blue, and I'll zoom back in here. Our blue is the 3rd pin here. If you follow it along, it jumps across this capacitor and this resistor over to this trace, which goes over to the base of our X105. Now you see X501 here, but that's not what this is. This is X105. So if we go to the base of X105, and we go across our collector and our emitter, base to collector, 0.687, so 0.7. Base to emitter, 0.693, so 0.7. Now let's go to our green one. So this here, E2, is our green one. You see that it carries this trace over to this trace across this capacitor and this resistor. You follow it through, base, collector, and emitter, and if we look at our emitter pin, it's not even in the circuit. Well, there's our problem. Nope. It's not even, it's completely broken out. There's our problem. There's our no green right there. Imagine that. So if we go again to, and we'll just do this off of the trace and not the actual pad so we can proof of concept here. Meter turned off. Refresh it. Alright, so if I go to red lead on the base to collector, we get 0.688. If I go to the other connection on the trace but not touch the pin, we don't have anything. We don't have our voltage drop. It's 0.1. If I touch the actual leg of the transistor, there's our 0.7. If I touch the pad next to it, we don't get 0.7. So that's the cause of our missing green. So let me solder that on, and very likely that will fix our problem. Now, kind of unspectacular repair here, but the information's good to at least get out there so you can see what can cause this. Now, I don't recall this ever being an actual problem, so I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought the transistor was open, quite honestly, but now I lost it here. Green right around to here, right there. So let's just solder this in so that'll never happen again. There, that'll never happen again now. So let's take a look at, let's just reflow the rest of these while we're here. Now I have replaced some of these transistors in the past for shorting out and causing the all of one color that I had talked about, but it's somewhat uncommon for them to actually fail in an open situation where you're missing a color. So in this case, our problem was a broken leg on X103, not broken leg, a lifted leg on R103 broken solder joint. You know, when you do the reflows, you just kind of visually look for things like that, and you don't always catch everything. And sometimes just normal wear and tear of moving the chassis around. You go to plug in, you know, someone goes to plug in the connector and they plug in the connector and they hit, you know, awkwardly, they press down on that transistor and it pops that leg out. That's very likely what happened. I might have self-induced that problem when I was connecting this inside the Robotron or something, but and over time, vibrations, it just finally popped off. Who knows? But bad solder joint on X103 for our green color. So let's hook this back up to the tube now and see if that solved our problem. Alright, so we're back on the tube, all hooked up. We got our anode, neck, yoke, ground, power, and video. There's no remote board on these. Obviously, pots are on the chassis, so our critical 7 are all good. TPG is on. And let's go ahead and turn it on, see if we get our green. 1, 2, 3. Okay, fires up again, that's good. And we should have our main screen here, and I realize I gotta clean my stupid lens on the camera. I just don't like this camera at all. It's not any good. And yes, we have that. So let's scroll through to our RGB, and voila! Imagine that, would you? And yeah. So there you go. Bad solder joint on X103. So if you got a missing color on a G07, follow these procedures and steps. And again, you know, if you don't have the bad solder joints on the X101, 102, or 103, you know, check them on the diode mode like I showed. And if you don't have 0.7 voltage drop to one of the legs like I showed, then it's very likely that transistor is faulty and not driving the color, and that's why you have no color. So it could be any circumstance in that general vein, but I would recommend following these steps that I showed you here, and things like that. So hopefully you found this information informative. If you did and you liked it, make sure you hit the like button. If you have a comment down below. Make sure you subscribe and share if you want to. And otherwise, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.